Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, here we go. Former NFL scout, got a podcast at the volume, 3 and Out, knows the Niners back and forth. You've already heard my preamble on that mess that was the Baltimore Ravens. All right, 34-31, Niners' second Super Bowl in 5 seasons, overcame a 17-point lead. So Dan Campbell's going to get, barbecued because of his play calling. He's not my favorite coach. He never has been. He's much more of a player sensibility than like a coach, than like a McVay who's young but is a coach. Campbell, to me, this is who he is. He's built the culture on it. I get it. Here's my take. Josh Reynolds drops, fumbles, blown coverages. How much heat does Dan Campbell deserve?
Colin, listen, going forward to me is situational. And I understand a lot of times throughout the year, tie game, up 1 score, week 6, week 10. It's 24-10. And you have the Niners weren't on the ropes. They were falling out of the ring. I mean, they were getting their ass kicked. You kick a field goal, you make it a 3-score game. So, yeah, you could say it hit them in the hands. But this is, we see guys drop balls all the time. You have a chance to kick a field goal. They have to score 3 times. I would understand if it's like, hey, it only makes 16 points. It's still a 2-score game. It would have made it a 3-score game, which at that point, the Niners defense wasn't playing well. Their offense, it gave the Niners life. And let's face it, the Niners had no life because Purdy was up and down in the first half, mainly down. Defense was atrocious. He didn't have to go for it on 4th down in the first half because he was getting first downs on like 2nd down every single series, right? They were like 5 of 7 on 3rd down. He was killing them.
I've said this to you and on FS1 10 times this year. The star of the Lions is Brad Holmes, the GM. It's not the quarterback. It's not Dan Campbell. He's not McVay or Shanahan. And Goff isn't Patrick Mahomes or even Herbert. He's one of the last true pocket guys in the league. I mean, Purdy looked like Lamar Jackson in the second half compared to Goff. So my takeaway is I still think the strength of this team is not the coach or the quarterback, though I really do like Goff. It's the players. They remind me of a younger version of the Niners. But, I think if you'd have said all year long what worried you about Detroit, it never would have been the talent. Everybody's secondary gets gashed. I mean, the Chiefs are one of the few teams you would have said, oh, Dan Campbell's coaching or Goff doesn't come through. Wasn't that sort of what happened?
I will say this, though, Colin. It does come down to your coordinators, in the playoffs. We saw it in Baltimore and Kansas City, right? This game, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, was by far the star of the game through 2.5 quarters. He was unstoppable. And you have a chance to me, the two making it 17 points. Now listen, Kyle said at the beginning of the week, this is part of playing Dan Campbell. He gets it on you. It can be crushing, but if your defense gets it and you're in a position where you're down, it swings it. And it swung it. And I'm with you. Like, listen, Dan Campbell's not calling the plays, right? Dan Campbell is there to give the thumbs up or thumbs down on that. And I'm a huge believer in he did the right thing. It's not about the end result. Bullshit. This is an end result sport. And when you don't get it in a win or go home situation, I have no problem during the season. I do think situationally, second half, NFC Championship, when you're beating the crap out of a team and you're the underdog, 7-point lead, I would kind of understand it. Like, really try. You're up 14 points, Colin. I mean, the 17 points, it would have deflated the 49ers. But that swing gave them life. But like you said, Dan Campbell lives by the sword, and sometimes the sword gets stuck right into his belly.
So I thought it was interesting because, Brock Purdy, I think he's a fairly limited thrower. He's okay. The pocket collapsed. He threw a really ugly pick at one point in the game. I have it written down some here. It was Brock Purdy in the second quarter. Pocket collapsed, and he's just not the kind of guy that can sit in there, stand over it.
He's small
without a huge arm. But I did think in the second half, and it felt like he was told by Shanahan, they do some man-to-man here, run. Because it looked very intentional to me by Brock Purdy in the second half. Like, it wasn't just, hey, I'm gonna go. He played with a script in the first half, wasn't working. Second half, it almost looks like Shanahan said, listen, don't be afraid to move. Okay, don't be afraid to move. It'll soften up the defense. That's what it looked like to me. Do you think it was just him going, or there was some intention to it?
I think he's a pretty instinctive player, right? Because he has to overcome height limitations and arm limitations. So one thing he's done all season long, and listen, through 2 quarters in this game and through the majority of the Packer game, I think everyone was thinking, is this guy their long-term quarterback? You can't play with this guy in big games. But this is why they believe in him. I mean, part of evaluating quarterbacks, I'm sure we'll talk about it coming up to the draft, is the intangible stuff. The kid's got some moxie and he's got some toughness and mental toughness. He doesn't wilt, because it would have been easy to go into the tank. I thought the first half he was playing like shit. I mean, he looked overwhelmed. In the pocket, he looked bad. Some of the passes, I mean, he was letting rip or flying over guys' heads. This is not raining today. It was 75 degrees in Levi Stadium. So I thought more that he's just an instinctive player and he just had to find a way. Almost like I have to will myself to make some plays. And he's a pretty good athlete. I know a lot of people don't think, part of the reason they moved off Trey Lance so quickly is because Purdy was the better athlete, right? He moves a lot better. Honestly, his movement is really an NFL. It's an underrated skill in the league, because how many plays do the Niners make outside the script of the given play? Avoid some sacks. He's small, so he can kind of dip and run around. Obviously, he can run relatively quick in a straight angle, but he can move quick laterally, keeps him play that one play that the little lob to Jennings, but that can also get him in trouble, right? I mean, you kind of live with the aggressive. He could kind of turn into a gunslinger. One reason everyone had him red flag coming out of Iowa State, now looking back, they were an undermanned team. He threw a lot of interceptions because he is willing to take some chances for a guy that doesn't exactly have Brett Favre or Josh Allen's arm.
One of the things, though they were a favorite, I thought clearly Baltimore melted down late in the game. And I thought Detroit, starting with Josh Reynolds' drops, melted down. And this is something that it really matters. San Francisco's got a veteran team. Kansas City, Andy, Travis, Spags, Mahomes. Mahomes is now a veteran player, right? There is something to be said, John. Been there, done that. Because I thought, I mean, you could see, when Lamar with that terrible throw in the end zone, Zay Flowers, what in the hell is that? Roquan Smith with a personal foul. And then I watched this game and I'm like, oh, this is nerves. I felt San Francisco melted a bit. Listen, there is this historic pressure. They've never made a Super Bowl. There's Jags, Houston, Browns, Lions. There are not many of them left. I kind of felt like they melted.
Well, I think you saw in the second half with the 49ers defense that they started playing with a different pace. They started flying to the ball. They definitely were more fundamentally sound. They weren't out of place constantly that was happening in the first half. And obviously the Chiefs, who have won Super Bowls, this Niner team hasn't won one, but they've been in this game 4 or 5 years, right? It was a huge deal for the Lions to be here for the first time in 30 years. And you just see a championship level character. And part of that, like you said, is just keeping your head, not attacking back, not swinging back when you get swung on, not, hanging your head when you miss a tackle. Because the Niners easily could have gone to the tank, I would say about 50% through this game. And I think they proved a lot. Like, the Chiefs showed up to win. That they have that championship character, that championship blood. They showed up ready to kick ass, and they did throughout the whole game. The Niners got hit in the teeth immediately, and they were hanging on for dear life, and they just won't fold. And it gets back to a lot of the character of the guys, from Deebo Samuel. How many plays did he make in the second half? George Kittle, Fred Warner, and Drake Greenlaw making open field tackles. All their DBs who had given up huge plays and big runs early in the game flying to the ball. So to me, there's a level of, like, coaches say this nonstop, don't quit, don't, play the next play. These games come down to small. Even the Chiefs-Ravens game, the score it wasn't big, right? 17-7. You're a fumble and a touchdown away from being right in it. So you can't get down on yourself. You can't mail in plays. And I mailed in the Niners. I thought, listen, they're in major trouble. And they flipped a switch, starting with a Dan Campbell missed fourth down.
Yeah, it was listen, the first part of this game looked like a brilliant young OC working a defensive coordinator who replaced a great defensive coordinator in DeMeco Ryans. I had a couple of GMs, a couple execs in the league. One of them, a GM, texted me, and they're like, boy, they missed DeMeco Ryans, who was just, and he's a brilliant young head coach. And I thought when I watched them, I mean, Detroit and Green Bay, offensive coaches, sort of offensive leaning cultures right now, are both very good first quarter teams. The quarterbacks, Goff and Jordan Love, stay on script. Where Jordan Love can get in a little trouble is off script, little erratic. Where Goff can get in trouble is sometimes playing from behind, or if you can get pressure on him. I did think the Niners got better pressure on him. But if you go back to the first half of that game, that was a lot of Ben Johnson. First of all, Goff had all day. They were running, so the Niners couldn't pin their ears back. It is interesting. I mean, I think my takeaway in both games today, the one thing I'll say is for a 7th round last pick and for an undersized guy, Purdy has been in so many games, high school, college, and now pro. He's just had so many snaps that he's just kind of situationally, I see no high or low with him. I mean, if he goes to the podium, John, he's unemotional. I've never seen him smile. Yeah. He smiles less than Kawhi Leonard. Like he's just like, he's just kind of static. That's not a terrible quality. He's not very emotional.
Very mature guy. I mean, he's engaged at 23, 24 years old. I mean, I would say that's not typical for NFL quarterbacks in 2024 in the modern day culture. One thing, speaking of the two quarterbacks in the second game, if you just put him in a pocket untouched, Goff throws a better ball. You can see much easier. He's 6'5". But the game, as games get uglier and as you can generate some pressure and things it's football. Things don't go as planned. You need to be able to make some plays with your legs. Jared Goff just cannot. Kirk Cousins cannot. And that is one element that Kyle would like Jared Goff. But there is an element of having just an athletic quarterback. You don't need to be Lamar Jackson. You just need to be able to move.
They drafted Trey Lance. They wanted it.
100%.
So Brock gives them that element. And it's funny, when they got Trey Lance, what I had heard in the building was he's not as athletic as we thought.
No, he's slow. And that's there are always a thing in scouting about time, speed, or athletic ability. If you went to watch a guy play basketball or a guy at the combine, the combine's in a month or whatever, all these guys run fast 40 times. And then there are guys like St. Brown, who I don't know what his 40 time is, but he plays really fast. Debo runs a 4.55. Well, put the ball in his hands, no one catches him, right? So I don't know what Brock Purdy runs, but I know when he scrambles or when he moves behind the pocket, he moves fast enough to get away from some guys. Now, he can't run away from everybody, but his play speed is really good. And this gets back to instincts. And to me, instinctive football players, the Lions have a lot of them. I mean, they really do. They have a fast team. So do the 49ers. Fred Warner plays really fast and Dre Greenlaw play really fast because they're instinctive players. I mean, they're good athletes, but when you can read and you know what's coming, I mean, these players in the NFL have been talking about this in the history since I've been alive, about knowing what's coming, preparing. It helps you play faster. And then there's the upper level of like the truly great instinctive players. And obviously the 49ers are full of them, right? I mean, they just are, from Kittle to Debo to, I think their coach, when he gets in a rhythm, Kyle's weird, right? Ben Johnson has just been red hot all season long. Kyle could have games where you feel like, God, what's he doing? And then today it just kind of flipped, and then he got his mojo, and the rest was history.
He tends to get a little tied to his script. And I think what happened today, John, is he did against Green Bay. He kind of gets stuck to his script because he's a smart guy and thinks my script's better than your script. We're staying with it. Today, he didn't have a choice. I mean, they had to make some changes.
Well, he's down a couple touchdowns.
So they got a little lucky with Dan Campbell's recklessness. So my guess is Kansas City would be favored by about 2.
I think Niners, line's already out. It's the other way. Niners are favored by 2, which is insane. 2.5.
I would take Kansas City, wouldn't you? I mean, you can't bet 2 weeks for Andy Reid to prepare. Look at the numbers.
I don't know about you. I was kicking myself. I put money on the Ravens, and obviously, Andy Reid had me to his house for Thanksgiving. I've seen the guy up close, and I can't believe I did it. And you knew right away. You're like, how did anyone even think that the Chiefs didn't have a chance? I didn't think they didn't have a chance, but the way that game went was just classic. Like, this is Belichick and Brady, but the 2020s version. And it was just, I would never bet against this team. Now, I do think the 49ers, in theory, should be much more mentally capable. The Ravens melted down, neutral site. They're better in a dome. But Mahomes, I don't know if you saw the stat. He has as many playoff wins now as Elway and Peyton Manning. He has as many playoff wins at 28 years old as Peyton Manning and John Elway's career. He's 2 away from Joe Montana.
Here's what's remarkable. So let's go and talk Kansas City, Baltimore. So what you saw with an offensive coach And you saw this with McVay this year and Matt LaFleur, that you had a flawed team, and there was a unit or a part of the team. With McVay, it was the offensive line. With LaFleur, it was the quarterback. And with Andy, it was the wide receivers. You watched real coaching over 3 months. That MVS, Rashee Rice is a 1. All three of those Rams O-line was a train wreck early. McVay, offensive coach, solved the riddle. LaFleur, over 8 weeks. Jordan Love was a bust to a star. And I thought this is what they can do. This is what McDermott drives us crazy, is that basically what you saw with the Rams, Packers, and Chiefs was their very best football by the end of the year offensively. Yet John Harbaugh signed off on that game plan. All Gus Edwards does is make plays. They ignored him. Isaiah Lively, they ignored him. And it was like, to me, it's the opposite. That what Baltimore, their basic DNA all season, and then you got into the game, and Harbaugh signed off in this game plan. And by the way, at halftime, no changes. They abandoned the run totally. So they went, this is what drives me nuts, is that offensive coaches, O-lines, young quarterbacks, backup quarterbacks, receiving course, they can fix shit over the course of a season. I watched that Todd Monk and Harbaugh performance today. And again, I'm not saying Kansas City Spags doesn't deserve credit, but the game plan and the play calling, they basically said, like Buffalo does, hey, Lamar, go make great plays.
In throwing the ball in the pocket, right? To me, last week, Josh Allen ran all over the place, especially outside the numbers, or outside the tackle box. So I thought, well, if he's going to do that, could Lamar run for 120 yards? Willie Gay's out. Today, that they did the opposite. They just tried to force feed the pass against a team that actually can handle, like they have a lot of very talented defensive backs. Their linebackers were struggling to catch Josh Allen last week. Lamar's faster. So why wouldn't you have designed power runs outside both? They just never did it. I thought the first half part of that game plan, and let's face it, the game felt over at halftime, was one of the most embarrassing in recent memory. They just had somewhat of, the blueprint last week with Buffalo, how to use a running quarterback against these guys and be very successful. And they did the opposite. The other thing that really hit me, do you know who might be the best coordinator in all of football? If you factor in, you're never going to lose him. No one is ever going to hire Steve Spagnuolo to be their head coach. It's never going to happen. So Andy Reid has a defensive coordinator who's clearly one of the best in the league that he never, ever has to worry about being hired to be a head coach. This isn't college. It's not like someone else can poach him. He basically just gets to have his defensive coordinator. If he wants to coach another 5 years, this guy gets to just stay with him. Think of what a luxury that is. What Spags is doing these last 5 years, especially the last couple, since their defense has gotten good, if he was a 41-year-old named John Smith, he would have interviewed for 4 jobs, even as a defensive coach, all around the league. No one's even picked up the phone. No one will. So Andy doesn't even have to worry about that. And like you said, the offense is always going to be taken care of. And I'll promise you this. I still think the Niners might win the Super Bowl, but this Chiefs team will never be as bad as they are offensively again, because they're going to get better. But defensively, you're in good hands because your defensive coordinator is elite. He's taken out Belichick in multiple Super Bowls. I mean, he's won Super Bowls now with Andy. He changed their culture defensively, and he's not going to leave.
This is New England. Scarnecchia, after Josh McDaniels bombed as a head coach. Part of what made them great was this institutional
cohesion,
and knowledge. Brady, Dante Scarnecchia, Bill Belichick, Josh McDaniels, Matthew Slater on special teams. Jesus, it was these like 6 seminal guys that were the best in the world at what they did. And I think, to your point, I think, Monken may lose his job after that, but I think what we forget about this, because I don't think Green Bay wanted to get rid of Joe Barry. I think they had to. There's such an outcry. But Green Bay's been one of those places historically that, players don't get in a ton of trouble. You're not going to overspend on free agents, no crazy owner. You got to draft and develop. Green Bay's had a 30-year continuity of offensive coaches, drafting and develop, no chaos at quarterback. I mean, now it looks like they're going to get another 12 with Jordan Love. They're going to go almost 50 years with no quarterback chaos. Marino left Miami. They've still never replaced him.
The cohesion in the NFL is not normal. Look at Kyle Shanahan. He's on his third defensive coordinator in what, 3 years? Right? Saleh got a job. D'Amico was there too. And now he's on Wilkes, who at halftime looked like he might have been on his fourth. But I think Andy, look at their core, right? Obviously, Spags now has been there over this 4 or 5 year run since they've been really good under Mahomes. And you ultimately have to choose a couple players around your quarterback, and you got to get it right. And for 20 plus years, Belichick always got it right. Well, they made a decision, right? They got rid of Tyreek, but they just stuck with Travis, who was easy to because he doesn't make that much money. He's a great player, and Chris Jones. So their core was basically one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, one of the greatest tight ends of all time, and one of the greatest interior pass rushers we've ever seen. And then they've just built it around there with great cohesion at coaching. Matt Nagy leaves, he gets fired, immediately comes back, right? So a lot like the Josh McDaniels thing, you know this guy who the quarterback knows. Cohesion's an underrated part. And now Andy Reid historically has been used to losing a lot of coaches, right? And he's comfortable doing it. But right now I think they got something special with the players and the coaches of everyone's on the same. The Niners have a lot of that going for them with the players, right? Kyle and this group of players have all been together now for 4 or 5 plus years. That matters.
You saw it in the second half. Of course it mattered.
Yeah.
You saw it. So it's interesting with Mahomes.
Look at Gibbs, rookie, who's fantastic. Fumbled the ball. Christian McCaffrey ain't fumbling a ball
Flowers, great rookie. Bonehead plays. Like, it matters, all this stuff. I mean, in fact, you could argue Gibbs and Zay Flowers made the big mistakes of the game. Great young players. So it's in Detroit, it's interesting because they could take a step back when Ben Johnson leaves. He's that good where everything could come back down to earth if you hire the wrong coordinator. Nick Sirianni in Philly is a great example. You miss replacing a brilliant OC. It's a different, everybody comes back down to earth. I was thinking about Mahomes today, though. When he started the game, he didn't have an incompletion to the second quarter. Is that I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. Peyton Manning, as good as he was a teeth clencher. Elway had some really bad big games. Brady was mostly an early game manager. I can say it now. Mahomes is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen. I can say it, and I've watched Marino and Elway. You know I love Brady. Now, Brady's more productive. But what we're watching here is a player that against the best defenses, in the highest leverage moments, the biggest audience, the most pressure, best defenses, is significantly better. Not better, significantly better than he is in the regular season. His playoff numbers, they don't make sense. It would be like Derek Jeter was a 300 hitter, hitting 370 in the postseason. It's like, wait, time out. What are we doing here? When I watch Mahomes, I'm like, okay, he made a throw today, and it was Travis Kelce made a great catch. But he was running. It was a muddy pocket. He moved forward, and he just sent a little floater up. And it was like Thanksgiving backyard football. And it was completed. And I thought, nobody cares about that play. I honestly today, in that environment, juxtapose watching Lamar and him. And I'm like, if Lamar's number 2 in the league, the gap between those two is the Grand Canyon.
Well, Lamar's not number 2 in the league. Josh Allen is. And listen, they're never going to go on record and say this, but I'll promise you, Josh and Spags have more fear facing Josh Allen than they do Lamar Jackson. Like, that's not crushing the guy. He had a great season, but he's not as good as those two guys. And it was on full display today. It was on display the first half a week ago against the Houston Texans. Like, he can be rattled really easy. And to me, Mahomes, I'm with you. The Brady thing is going to be hard, even if he wins a couple more and ever get to the 6.
It's like LeBron and MJ, because it's just there's so much production and titles and trophies from MJ, but LeBron does significantly more things better than MJ.
I mean, last night he had like 20 rebounds against the Warriors. It was incredible. He's got gray hair all over his face. He's got 20 rebounds beating the Warriors. The thing that Mahomes does that parallels Brady to a T is in these big moments. Now, he can do a sexier play because he can move around in the pocket. Tom could not. They never fuck up. They just refuse. And in the second half, and Romo kind of mentioned this, it's unsexy to say this word, but when you get a lead in a big spot, the game manager aspect, or maybe Bill Cowher did. He's like, he game managed like a Hall of Fame player. No one on the other team is touching the ball. Anyone around me, I'm either getting rid of the ball, throwing it out of bounds. You're going to have to beat us, but you're not going to beat us because I give you something. And Tom and the Patriots were elite at that. Peyton would screw up. He would throw the ball to the other team sometime. Had some awful interceptions in some big games, right? The teeth get tight. He gets loose, but he's very under control, a lot like Tom. It's like they're super focused, but they're very calm and loose. I mean, how many guys in the history of sports have had that? Like Tiger, Michael, Tom. I mean, it's a tiny, tiny list. Derek Jeter in the playoffs, maybe. Big Poppy. Most guys just naturally get a little tight. You saw Jared Goff. Like, he just kind of felt a little tighter. Lamar, the pressure, you can feel it. You don't even need to be at the game. You can feel it on the TV. You're like, God, this drive's huge. And then if you don't get a 2nd and 8, all of a sudden you're like 3rd and 8. You're like, oh, the coaches clench up. Everyone clenches up. And this is where the championship blood and the championship medal. I saw it when I lived in the Bay Area with the San Francisco Giants. It all starts at the top. And I'm telling you, Andy Reid, if you talk to anyone that plays for him, they're like, his team meetings after losses, wins, they all feel the same. He's not a yeller and a screamer. He does not invoke tightness anytime you're around him. He's naturally kind of loose. He's not a big screamer, but enjoy, but he's not a big downer in the negative times. So I think it all starts with him, and he has the perfect quarterback for him. But to me, Patrick, the maturity today to be in full control on the road against a great defense, like you said, early in that game, that dot he threw to Kelsey down the seam was like, it was like, it would have been like watching Michael Jordan in 97 or 98. Like, good luck, guys. You're in for one.
The throw to Kelsey when Kyle Hamilton, he was on a single side by himself, and it was first, Kelsey made a hell of a play. First time all year a tight end beat Kyle Hamilton for a touchdown. And after that throw, I'm like, he's on one. Okay, this
isn't Kelsey also a good? We talk a lot about Mahomes and Andy, but think about Kelsey all year long. You're like, is this going to be his last year on the Chiefs? Are they going to have him take a pay cut? Like, he's kind of getting old. What happens when the playoffs start? Looks like the Hall of Fame A- guy. Now, may not be as dominant as he once was, and
he was great
at 32,
today.
33 years old. But he's still. It's like a throwback, like Scottie Pippen, like Michael looking at him like, I need you. And Travis like, I'm ready. And he said it all week. He's like, I've never wanted a game more than this game. Like, these guys, their level of focus and obviously their talent is second to none. But today it was watching greatness. Like that game was, were you shocked? You didn't think they would dominate like that. Did you like the Chiefs?
The Lions looked exactly like I thought. I said on Friday, I said, Detroit will probably take the lead. They're a great first half team. Ben Johnson, I said, Purdy will play from behind. It'll be good. It'll be close. If Debo plays, I said, he'll make 2 or 3 big plays and they'll win. I think I predicted the score would be 34-28 or 34-27. So that game, now I didn't expect the meltdown and the huge lead, but the final result was San Francisco just made more big plays. Their physicality took over. Detroit was not quite ready in the moment. That's what I thought I would see. It just, how we got there was different. I do not remember ever a playoff game with what I perceived to be a great team being more wrong. That game, first of all, my entire belief on the game was, they're going to pound the rock, make Mahomes sit on the sideline, and it was Kansas City that had a 9-minute drive. The game looked the opposite of what I looked like. I thought Baltimore.
The time of possession, I remember they put it on the screen one time. You're like, this is insane.
And they abandoned the run. Like, I thought it was going to be Baltimore lead. Kansas City can't quite keep up. In the end, Baltimore couldn't score. They abandoned. They didn't abandon the run. They never ran. They never attempted to run.
Yeah.
So that game. Okay, so let's talk about this.
How do you match the experience with the coaches on Kansas City? When you think about Andy's now been in the league for 30 plus years, and all the Spagnuolo can lean back on the games against Belichick and his experience. I mean, it's pretty special.
Defender of Lamar. I love how much he cares. Every year he gets bigger, he gets better, and we cannot deny he's a better pocket quarterback today than he used to be. No question.
Fantastic player.
I did think today it is now fair to say not quite the same in the playoffs. I defended him forever. I used to say Peyton Manning wasn't the same in the playoffs. It's hard to win in the playoffs. Today, and again, I'm not blaming him. He had no run support. I hated the game plan. But he melted a little late. And I think it's fair to say, and he had a couple of bad throws. I do think it's fair to say that he tends to be run-centric. He can melt a little. He's not as good from behind. Most aren't. But when you watched him and Mahomes, I'm like, some of the criticism is just now. I defended it, but it's just.
Well, from a specific football standpoint, he got fidgety today. He got rushed. He looked like the younger Lamar, where in the playoffs, when it wasn't going Baltimore's way, he would one read and then kind of scramble around and kind of scramble within the pocket, and it just throws everything off instead of all season long. Now, granted, they were beating the crap out of most teams, right? He was very under control. It's like, well, if this is the version of the player, I'm all in because he's calm, kind of moving around. Today, he got very fidgety. He felt very uneasy about 2 seconds into the plays. And part of that, I think, gets back to the immense amount of pressure in a spot like that against that opponent. And you start going, we're down. You just naturally kind of freak out. Now, maybe we look back in a couple years and he wins a game like this and he says, going through that experience helped me out. But today he resorted back to the guy. Like I said this last week, everyone shitting on Josh Allen. Was he perfect? No. But I never watched for a moment and thought I wouldn't want that guy on my team. If you put that guy on a team that's stacked, you're winning with that guy. It was not his fault. He did not look overwhelmed. I'm not saying Lamar looked overwhelmed, but I need you to be in complete control. The moment you get fidgety, it's the Peyton Manning thing. In the playoffs, you're playing the best of the best. He used to lose to the Patriots. You're playing Andy and Mahomes here. They're not going to screw up, and this defense is solid. Like, just live to fight some other, get a 7-yard gain, right? Complete some balls. The balls were flying on him. The rain started coming. But to me, he was very, very uneasy in the pocket. And that, to me, you kind of knew it right away. Like, you could feel it. And it happened against the Houston Texans. And then he came out a different guy. Why? They started running the ball, calmed everything down. He never calmed down. Their offense never calmed down.
Monken didn't do him any favors. The way to settle a quarterback down is get him a run game. By the way, second half, Niners, Christian McCaffrey peeled off a couple big runs. Everybody comes down. The temperature in the room comes down. Little swing pass to Debo. Debo breaks tackles. The sideline play to Kittle. It just brings the temperature down. It gets the crowd into it. So San Francisco, after a rocky first half by Purdy, what are we going to do? Let's get him some yards. Let's not put the pressure on him. They never did that with Baltimore. They just kept dropping him back. By the way, and Spags is bringing extra people. Baltimore can't block him. So at no point did Baltimore say, listen, because they saw what you saw. God, Lamar's frenetic here. Let's get him help. Nope. They just dropped him again with 6 rushing and 5 blocking.
If I told you this morning that before the game kicked off, the Chiefs are only going to have 17 points, you would probably assume they're going to lose, right? Like, I didn't envision a spot where they could win 17-16 or 17-13 or 17-10. But what happened today? Awful pick in the end zone in a triple coverage. Karlaftis gets a big strip sack against them. Obviously, the Chiefs came through with turnovers. You can't afford to have the 49ers overcame the pick, Purdy. It was early. They would not have been able to overcome a pick in the second half, and let alone countless turnovers. Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson, the fumble strip sack. I mean, you're not overcoming that against the new dynasty. It's not possible, but it starts with him. I mean, the whole building, I would imagine every guy and female that bought a ticket felt it early, like, oh, we're in trouble. This quarterback looks a little off kilter. And let's face it, he was.
Yeah. I think the Super Bowl is going to be interesting for a lot of reasons. San Francisco, as you noted, comes out a favorite. I would bet Kansas City.
I think that line will come storming down, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, listen, this institutional coaching.
The Chiefs just won the Super Bowl last season. They won the Super Bowl. They're back in it. How are they not the favorites?
Played them before. Mahomes wasn't making the money. The roster was a little deeper on the defensive side, more experienced. Purdy's a better runner than Garoppolo. I always thought Jimmy threw a great ball between the hash marks. Didn't move much. Purdy gives you a new element. McCaffrey wasn't on that team, so this team has got some elements.
Niners offense is way better now. Their defense is not as good as that team. That defensive line had Buckner. That defensive line was good.
I would take Kansas City in the points, because I've watched San Francisco play crappy football for 3 quarters against the Packers and 2.5 quarters against the Lions. So my takeaway is, I haven't seen Kansas City have a bad quarter. They've had 12 excellent quarters. With San Francisco, they've overcome. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. That Green Bay.
Go back to the Baltimore game. They've had some bad games over the past month. It's not even just the playoffs. They've been off.
So, I got to tell you, I find I don't know why I bet against Kansas City. There's just so much institutional intelligence. Um, it was so clear today early on. I mean, Kelsey had one of his best halves ever, and not even just touchdowns, just making diving catch after diving
It
catch.
was
And there's
fantastic.
been this sort of narrative he's not focused. There's Taylor Swift, and I'm like, well, he's showing off for today because that shit when I'm watching.
Yeah.
That maybe he has a ring in his pocket he's delivering tonight because that was like one of the he was engaged. I thought Travis Kelsey really set the tone. And you know what else I liked? In big games, Baltimore didn't give it to Gus Edwards. It's like, what are you doing? Didn't They didn't go with their strength. What did Kansas City do? Travis Kelsey, Travis Kelsey, Travis Kelsey, Pacheco, Rice, who's become. I love their game plan, which is what's Spag's rep? Pressure. What did they do? Played
Yeah.
right into his strengths. Go look at everything Kansas City did today. It was all the best version of what they did. And I think San Francisco's second half, by the way, looked exactly okay. Here, guys, at half. This is who we are. Let's go do what we do. Now, Detroit did the same thing, which is reckless. But Baltimore's the only team this weekend. I thought, what was that? I don't get that. So I thought Kansas City and San Francisco, Niners second half, really that's who they are.
One thing that Andy has changed definitely the last couple of years, and part of his Tyreek's gone, is the knock on him was always pass, pass, pass. He has no problem giving to Isaiah, who against the 49ers, I mean, look at them. They can't stop the run right now. So I would expect for the Super Bowl a lot of Pacheco because stopping the run is not, and let's face it, their outside passing game with the Kansas City Chiefs is not as good as Detroit's. So the 49ers are going to have to find a way to slow down this game because that if you're just giving up 5-6 yards of carry, you're just going to be up against the ropes. It's impossible not to be because it keeps your offense off the field. Obviously this guy if it's 3rd and 3, they're talented enough to get those and they have the greatest quarterback of all time, but you have to stop. You cannot stop the run. Like they would have lost this game, the version of the way their defense was playing to the Kansas City Chiefs. And now it's inside fast. Now that benefits the 49ers too. But the other kind of swing is think about Mahomes these last 2 weeks, just perfect. He's just been A plus, A plus. Purdy's, been a little bit of a roller coaster. I don't think you can afford roller coaster Purdy throwing a pick six or something against Kansas City and being down 10-0 to the level of coaching staff you're going to go to. Now, maybe the Niners can figure out some defensive stuff. But here's one problem, Colin. When you invest a lot into a certain position, like ultimately, like why are the Chiefs struggling with the wide receivers? Well, they don't have a great player. Like it's not like they've bought one guy who's not living up. They drafted a guy in the second round, Sky Moore, didn't work out, whatever. Rice is whatever, a 3rd round pick. Like they'll be fine. They will invest more in that. The 49ers have invested a ton into the defensive line. Right now, Bosa made some plays today, but Chase Young, they traded a 3rd round pick for. He's nowhere. Armstead and Hargrave today were many places to be found. By the second half, at least Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw started making some plays. But when you invest in an area, this was the downfall of the Philadelphia Eagles. When you put all that money into the defensive line, well, if the defensive line doesn't play at like an A- level, and if you put them at like a C plus B minus, you're going to be screwed because you're going to have major liabilities at other spots. This is a business that you build the pie chart over. And the Niners are very dependent on this defensive line. And right now, it is not good. Beside Bosa, none of them are making plays. And they definitely, against the run, they're all getting turned around in these gaping holes. So Andy Reid might have been a passing coach, but I would imagine that you're going to get a big dose of running game come the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I don't have a strong feel because I will say this. I think Kansas City has the best quarterback, the best player I've ever seen. So there's my edge. And I think Andy Reid, I think I've told you this before, that if the NFL would have written that CTE check to the Players Union 10 years earlier, and the league would have pivoted to offense, Andy'd be the best coach ever.
Yeah.
Belichick probably wouldn't have 2 or 3 of his Super Bowls, but it was late. So Andy was working against the league. I mean, these defensive coaches reigned supreme for years and decades in this league. Well, I mean, now you watch John Harbaugh's game plan today. You look at McDermott, Mike Tomlin, how these teams struggle on the O-line, run games. Is it a surprise that Kyle Shanahan and Andy Reid are in the championship game? Only McVay, to me, maybe Peyton, but that's kind of the highest cut of the cloth in this league offensively, is it not? Is it not? Shanahan's the best scheme guy in the league, Andy's the best play designer and play caller. McVay's the best offensive culture builder. And then I think Peyton and LaFleur deserve a lot of props. Ben Johnson's probably the best young coordinator. Shane Steichen, I think, is getting really close to put into that.
Yeah, he's damn
but
good.
I mean, it's not a surprise. This is the coaching sport. NBA is a players' league. Baseball is a pitcher's sport. Football, quarterback, and a coach's league. We have the two best offensive coaches.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think both of them, and this is what my issue we talked about college football during the season with Lincoln Riley and some college coaches is they don't even look to the defensive side of the ball. They don't attack it till it's too late. Is Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan are huge believers. Now it doesn't always work, but doubling down on defensive lines, getting aggressive players, paying for corners, drafting guys high on defense. Because part of my ability, right, is going to be I can help the guys out on this side. Now, it helps when you hit star players like Kelsey or Tyreek Hill or trade for Christian McCaffrey. But Jawan Jennings, no one heard of the guy 3 years ago, and now he's making big plays every single game, right? That they can create that with no names. And defensively, they've always, allocated a lot of resources over there. And sometimes offensive coaches, are either two hands off. I give Sean McVay a lot of credit. Look how the defensive coordinators he's always invested in, how much emphasis they put when they do have draft picks on that side of the ball, right? Because you cannot win in these big spots. Obviously, the Niners were getting shredded, but their defense came through in big spots that are highly paid, right? Obviously, Kansas City has a fantastic defense. The Baltimore was there because they had the number one defense. So offense is huge, and the offensive, head coaches are the ultimately like the swing part of it. But you got to emphasize defense as an offensive coach, because you're going to need that side of the ball. And the Chiefs have really benefited from that this year because their offensive personnel is not as great, but they keep getting better, right? And obviously Kyle, since they've been good, they've always had very physical defense. I also think practicing physically is a really, really big thing. And Andy Reid is still known for running the hardest training camp. Kyle Shanahan talked to their players. Monday through Friday is not that fun. It's a very, very intense environment. It's not negative like Belichick, but in terms of football wise, you better know your shit or people are on you. And practice is not just lollygagging around in sandals. What was the knock on the Eagles this year? It's like, oh, they weren't really practicing. They were an older team. Well, I get it, but if you do not practice in football, you practice 4 or 5 times more than you play every week. So these coaches are addicted to practice. And Andy Reid and Kyle, they like practice as much as they like the games. Their excitement, getting ready, because it's the preparation but it's also setting the team's tone. It's why Harbaugh's such a great coach. His practices are physical. Like, his team doesn't just show up and shove people around. It starts in the offseason, starts in training camp, and then it's through the weeks during the season. It was always something famous Belichick did. When they were always the number 1 or 2 seed and they got the bye week, I heard Julian Edelman was like, we used to scrimmage in full pads. Like, it was to set the tone for physicality. We didn't want to lose that because that is the separating factor offensively and defensively. And when you practice hard, everyone gets better. What do you watch when you watch the Chiefs and the Niners? I mean, people are getting hit hard offensively, defensively, and it starts with the head coach. You can't fake that. Listen, most people in life aren't tough. Like, Dan Campbell's a tough guy. Jim Harbaugh's a tough guy. You go, is Kyle a tough guy? Well, the way he views football philosophically, 100%. Andy Reid's always smiling and hugging people. I promise you. And he loves throwing bombs. Loves toughness in football, and it shows in the biggest moments because that's where he needed to come through.
John Middlekauff, former NFL scout, 3 and Out, podcast for the Volume. This is always great. So I think we'll meet again next week. Listen, we have the best coach and quarterback against maybe the second best coach and best roster. And so the conspiracy theorists can say the league wanted Taylor Swift in, but it looked like Todd Monken wanted the Chiefs in, not Roger Goodell with that goofy game plan. It's been a hell of a year. I look at this year, and
these ticket prices to get in. I might need to get in that building, Colin. I might need you just to call some people because this ticket price, the get in price, could be. I bet it's going to shatter records. I mean, in Vegas, right? And Taylor Swift.
What do you think that Lions-Niners rating is today? Fox has been on a roll. Jesus, Fox has been on it.
48 million people, you think?
But listen, I like the NBA. I watched both the Celtics-Clippers game Saturday night, first half, second half of the Lakers-Warriors. I love the NBA. NBA is dying to get like 1.9 million for a game.
I know.
The NFL, and I think legalized gambling as jet fuel is completely pulling away. Three or four things are happening to the NBA. One, the NFL took Christmas back, which was a huge marketing day for the league, NBA. NFL said, yeah, we're done with that. We're going to own it. Hurts. That was a real launching point. Secondly, the league's getting highly European. Most of the best players, Luka, Giannis, Jokic. Doesn't bother me. I love it. But it is getting, our domestic players have very little imprint. These guys come, Wemby's the next great player, SGA's from Canada. And I'm not opposed to it. I like stylistically. I love watching Jokic play. But, fans often, they kind of root for their own. They want to see their Kansas guy and their Ohio State guy. And so that's the second thing. And the third thing with the NBA is that LeBron carried the league for 15 years. And that was so much fun as I watched it this weekend. And as I watched it, I thought, is this the last meaningful game between those two? I literally was getting romantic. I'm like, we're not getting any Steph LeBron, this could be one of the last times they really light the world up.
Warriors are like 5 games under 500. They're not going to be in the playoffs. I thought, can the NBA, you know how golf gives sponsors exemptions? Like, could you give a sponsor exemption to get Steph Curry into the playoffs? Because that's got to be the highest rated NBA game of the year. Do you know one thing I think in the NFL, and I'm sure you've talked about this, but I really notice it in my life, whether it's my girlfriend or her friends, whether it's just other ladies in my life, my mother and her friends, a lot of women watch the NFL. My mom watched every snap today, and she's because I worked for Coach Reed and he was so good to me. She doesn't miss a Chiefs game. She's a diehard Chiefs fan, and I know so many moms that, I'm from Northern California. They don't miss a snap of the Niners. And I think that's probably the same moms in Philly, women in Philly, Dallas. I think you go around the country. No way basketball has that. I mean, I think and this has anything to do. This is well before Taylor Swift ever showed up dating Travis. I'm telling you, I think the audience uptick in women watching football, specifically the NFL, has got to be all-time high.
My wife doesn't like sports. Glued to the game today with her sister. My sister doesn't like sports. Became a Seahawk fan with Russell Wilson. My sister and my wife do not watch sports. Anything ever. I mean, the idea of taking my wife to a baseball game, it would be like taking her to a bingo game at an old folks home.
Yeah.
She just wouldn't do it. No, I think you're right. In fact, I saw a number. It was I just got to Fox about 7 years ago, and they were showing, I got some research from the people upstairs, Mike Mulvihill, and I stopped by. I used to see him like once every few months, and I see him a couple times a year. Very bright guy, all the numbers, and I was shocked.
I follow him on Twitter.
Like, it was like 50% of the fans were women or close to it. I was like, no, that can't be true. It was.
Like people up in Seattle and your sister's friends and just random females over the last 10 years when Russell Wilson came onto the scene. How many of them do you think followed the Seahawks really closely? I bet it was pretty high.
Yep. And I also think there's something about football. It's once a week. So you don't feel, women have big, broad lives, careers, kids.
Yeah.
One game a week. By the way, it's Sunday. And so husbands are around, families around. It's kind of like lunch, dinner, beer. It's real family feeling football. It's once a week. It's also, to be honest with you, I do think there's something to be said. You have to be a real baseball fan to get baseball. There's literally 162 games. Spring training, postseason, there's over 200. It's a maze of games. I'm a sportscaster. I get lost with it. NBA, so many meaningless games, load management. NFL players, once a week, they play hurt. And, for most of your stars, the careers are 10 years. So you just get used to seeing people. And by the way, many of those players that are great in the NFL, they were great in college. So I just you can go follow Caleb Williams at USC to the Bears. So you have some connection to him.
I also think one thing, most of my friends, either from college or high school, if I went on Instagram today, I swear to God, 80% of them were at the Niners game. And I think if you grew up in an NFL city like Philly or Dallas or wherever, or the big college cities, it's such an event, right? It's fun to go tailgate. It's getting out of the house, going to hang out. It's really just all day. It's a positive thing. Now the game might not turn it. It was going to be a negative thing if they lost, but it is something fun to do. And like you said, it's not one of those, it's once during the season, right? It's every other week if you're a season ticket holder. I know countless season ticket holders. It's a very easy thing to follow. It's always easy to get rid of your tickets. And I don't know many people that are associated with a team as a season ticket holder or go to games that complain about it. And I think it's the opposite in the other sports where I know so many people over the last 5 years that have taken their kids to see Steph Curry, and just for whatever he didn't play, right? And that's dramatically hurt the game. You know, when you're going to a Kansas City Chiefs game or a 49er game, that if I'm wearing a Debo jersey or I'm wearing a Kelsey or Mahomes jersey, that guy's going to have a broken leg or a
John,
broken shoulder, or else he's
those
playing.
Guys,
and then if he's playing, he's going to give me everything he has.
Totally relatable. I mean, Embiid doesn't play against Jokic, and we're both NBA fans. I watched Clippers Celtics.
I'm dipping. I've gone the. It's just I've found it with the load management and the effort. Last night was pretty remarkable, but that felt like a game from 15, 20 years ago, right? The Lakers and Warriors. That's not what the NBA is anymore. They've lost. The guys making so much money. The urgency of the sport has been lost. That's what's amazing about football. Is the money has, like, Patrick Mahomes had a $450 million contract. And if I told you that guy was playing for his career, you would have thought today, like, his contract was on the line. So the money hasn't phased any of these guys. You might not play well, but you never feel like anyone's mailing it in. Everyone's always trying. And I do think it's a culture of football from pee-wees to high school to college to the pros. Coaches yell at you, right? You're just getting yelled at. You're getting humbled daily.
If you go look at the NBA media coverage, it's like sycophants.
Oh, it's too positive.
It's just basically they're all PR people, because nobody, even the ones I respect, they don't want to lose access to the top 4 agents and the top 12 players. In the NFL, there's just, I mean, Kansas City. I mean, take Kansas City. Travis Kelce gets pissed off at you. I'll go talk about Mahomes. I'll talk to Reed. Shit, they're 2 corners. Yeah. There's just guys to talk to. In the NBA, there's like a player or a team that you have to have the access to. I used to have a buddy that covered the San Francisco Giants, and he's like, man, those guys will turn on you. Like, those guys will turn on.
Well, if you had to be nice to Barry, or else he'd throw a bat at your face.
So it's like in the NFL, it's just the media is hard, but supportive. I mean, we're not here taking. I mean, I used to be brutal on Baker. I think he's great. I love his redemption story. So
don't you think most players are unfazed by it? Like in the NBA, they go into the tank and they get mad and they start lashing out. In the NFL, it's like, whatever, I'll see you next week.
NFL players, because they have shorter careers and they stay in college longer, a lot of them marry their sweethearts in college. And because of the sport,
younger families
and kids sooner. And so they're not on their phone all day. I mean, if you're some of these NBA guys, you're 27, never married, no kids, you're doing your thing, you're on your phone all day at your hotel. I tell people this all the time, that people I've had, not in a long time, but I pretty much have my staff, except for games like today when they're big games, but I have my staff pretty much run my social. And I tell people all the time, there's no value in reading it. But NBA guy, again, but I'm married, kids, business, podcasts. If I was a 28-year-old sportscaster and I didn't have any of that, I'd probably be on the phone all day. So I think NFL players tend to come into the league more mature. They they also know one injury and they're done. So they put their money away. You don't hear a lot of NFL stories of guys going broke. Most of the guys put their money away because they know they're just a one hit from being done. You know?
Yeah. So what's your guess on the numbers today? Are we talking over 50 million?
I'll say 40.
That Niner game got pretty good in the second half.
Say 46.5 million. Super Bowl get over 50. I mean, you know what's so funny? When the season started, I think we were a little concerned at Fox. I'm not going to speak for our upper management, but the AFC,
Rodgers gone,
quarterbacks. And Aaron had left the AFC, and Russell Wilson the year before had left the AFC, and we're like, all right, Jared Goff, how long Stafford playing? I mean, it was like no kid. But what's been great is the NFC has these great rivalries: Dallas against Green Bay, San Francisco, and then Detroit. Such a heartwarming story is the NFC's got these. The AFC's got a lot of like
Philly's just interesting.
And if you go to look at the AFC, it's Tennessee's and Jacksonville's and the Houston Texans.
Yeah,
Kansas City's obviously a profoundly popular franchise. But in the NFC, you've just got these built-in 60 set. Even the bad teams, the Bears, were kind of fascinating this year. Is Justin Fields going to work? And now Washington's going to get Ben Johnson, richest owner, most cap space. That'd be kind of interesting. The NFC has these big foundational. People don't understand, John. out east. They have no idea how popular the Niners are out west. They have it.
Well, when you say that the NFC East, if we were going to compare it to college football, would be like the power of the
Yeah.
SEC, and then if you took like the Packers and the 49ers, that's like Michigan, Ohio State. I'm not, obviously, the AFC is really good. I'm just talking the power of the brands. I mean, I don't think people understand like when the 49ers and Green Bay play each other, how many people were watching that game. I mean, you're talking about my entire life. That's a rivalry going on 30 plus years. These two teams have been in the biggest games in the biggest sport now for
John
decades.
Madden, the great late John Madden, used to have a line, and he used it at Fox, and management often kind of harkens back to it. Does the game sound big? San Francisco Niners sounds gigantic. Dallas Packers sounds. Cleveland Browns, Houston Texans, it just doesn't sound that big. A couple years ago, Jacksonville Chargers, it just doesn't sound that big.
Well, you could argue this is the best Super Bowl match. I mean, obviously the Cowboys being in it, given the quantity of people, but the second best matchup would be the 49ers against Mahomes. Right?
No, I think listen, it's again, I would say the Niners.
Obviously, Dallas got to get to the NFC Championship for that ever to happen, but you just know what I mean. The brand.
Niners are the Yankees of the West. The Lakers are popular, but it's the NBA.
Totally.
I think the Niners are even bigger than the Dodgers.
How many Niner fans live in Los Angeles?
Did you see this year? Was it this year the Niners played the Raiders?
Well, it's been the last 3 years, Colin. They sell that place out. They call it Niner South.
Crazy. I mean, I went to Starbucks this morning, so I got a great workout in. I went to Starbucks. There were 3 guys in Niners, full Niners gear. It was like $8.50. And I'm like, and then where else did I go? Oh, I had to go to a pharmacy. And there were 2 more Niner hats in there. And I'm like, people just, when you're in Los Angeles, it is Dodger hats, Lakers shirts, and Niner hats.
You know, Kyle always had said before he took the Niners job that he was only going to go to a job that he felt had a good quarterback situation because he had seen so many people fail. And then the Niners offered him the job. Well, he had been there with his dad when Steve Young and they were winning a Super Bowl. So it's hard to say no. And he went because of the power of his experience there. And when you win with the 49ers, like, to me, they're one of the biggest brands of my lifetime, any sport.
Well,
they've just been consistently good. And now, I mean, they are just rattling. Like, they're a bigger brand than Kansas City. Obviously, Kansas City could win back-to-back Super Bowls, but it's not even close in terms of fans.
How many interesting quarterbacks? John Brody, into Montana, into Steve Young, even like into Kaepernick. Alex Smith was capable with John.
Garcia was going to Pro Bowls, going toe-to-toe with Favre.
And then they had Garoppolo got him to a Super Bowl. Now it's Brock Purdy. They haven't all been great. Montana Young were. But they've always had interesting, even Kaepernick, they've had interesting quarterback stories and good enough to win a bunch of games. I mean, God, they got to a Super Bowl with Kaepernick, Garoppolo, and now Purdy. How many organizations could do that?
Do you think the reason Brock is such a polarizing story is just simply his draft spot or simply because of his draft spot and he's the 49ers quarterback?
You know, here's what I think. I don't think he's polarizing. I think we live in a debate culture, and I fall into I think he's good. I don't think he's great. I think he's good. I don't think he's big enough, his arm, but he's good. And I thought his second half today running around, he was really good. And then there's those that say, you know, my buddy Jason McIntyre, he's great. And I'm like, no, the scouts know what they're doing. I mean, there are these occasional Kurt Warner stories or Antonio Gates where GMs, and both of those, by the way, there were circumstances why they didn't get drafted. But I think there is this, he's great, he's this. I think Brock Purdy is a good quarterback. If I argued he's Kirk Cousins with mobility, well, that's a pretty good quarterback. C.J. Stroud is Jared Goff with mobility. That's a pretty good quarterback. So if I said to you, he's kind of Kirk Cousins.
You can win a lot of games with Jared Goff.
You win a lot of games with Kirk Cousins. Imagine if he could move. Oh, you can. It's called Brock Purdy. That's what he is. When C.J. Stroud came out, all the scouts were like, he's Jared Goff. Well, he is really, except he moves better. Well, shit, Jared's good without moving. So what's he like when he moves? So I think the comp is like C.J. Stroud to me is, I mean, Jared throws a beautiful ball. Stroud throws a beautiful ball. He just moves better. So I think Brock Purdy feels like to me kind of a pedestrian arm, pedestrian
arms average,
pedestrian body, but he moves, and that's a good player.
And he makes plays
in big spots.
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
See you,
John Middlekauff, former NFL scout. We love him. 3 and Out podcast. Always money.